I don't know if this is on. Okay, hi. Hi, welcome to my stream. Thanks for tuning in. Today, I want to teach you a little bit about programming. So, I am not going to assume you have done any programming before. I am going to start by showing you how to install the software you need to get started, and then I'm going to walk you through making a little web page, a very simple web page. Hopefully, it's only going to take 30 minutes or so. And I haven't done any preparation for this. This is very spare of the moment for me. So um, let me know if you have any questions. There's a chat on the side. And yeah, let's get started. So I'm going to start by showing you how to install. So to start, let's install the software that we use to write code. So that's called a text editor. And the one I'm going to show you is called VS Code. So if you go to Google and you type in VS Code, you'll get this Visual Studio Code, and you can download that. If you're using Windows, it's going to look different. I'm using a Mac. So once that's done, which will take a little bit of time, we'll install it. So why am I doing this? Well, you know, the last few days I've been getting up and reading Reddit or Twitter and going to bed and reading Reddit or Twitter, and I just wanted to have something to start and finish my day which doesn't involve Reddit and Twitter. So here we go. So I'm going to open this in Finder. And so now I've downloaded it. I'm just going to open it up. And I'm sure you've installed software before. So just drag VS Code into Applications. And then I can open VS Code. Now I've actually already got it installed, but this is what it looks like when you open it up. It'll look a little bit different for you, probably because you won't have all of these recent things. But once you've installed VS Code, it's going to look something like this. And well, to start, let's click. Well, we need to create some files. So once you've got the text editor, the first thing what we need to do to create a website is we need to create some files with that website in it. So if you open up Finder on a Mac, or however you create a file on Windows, if you're using Windows, let's create a folder first. So we'll create a folder for the website. Let's call it Learn Something About Programming in 30 Minutes. And then once you've created a folder, you can create it here. You can open the folder in VS Code. Here it is, and there we go. So this is where we're going to create the code for the website. And start. So I've opened this folder. I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call that index.html. And the reason it's called index.html, which you'll find out eventually, but let's just create a file called index.html. If you have a look in Finder again in that directory you created, you'll see that this directory and the directory in the editor are the same. So I can close this now, or we can just work within VS Code, and that's where all of the stuff that we need to do to create a website is. So we've got this index.html file, and let's start by writing something really simple. Let's say hello world. I lied. We still need Finder open because we want to open this file. Now, if you double click on the file after we've typed something in and saved it, which I've done, let me show you one more thing. If you type hello world, you'll see this dot, and every time I save by typing using the save keyboard on the save shortcut on my keyboard. So I'm going to save it, and you'll see the dot disappears. Then we can open it in Finder and double click on index.html, and what that'll do is it'll open up index.html in a web browser, and there we go. It says hello world. So that's my very first web page. Now, of course, it's a really boring web page, so let's see what else we can do inside. Let's see what else we can add to the web page. So if I say something like hello world, I made a web page. So type in I made a web page, save it, open Safari again with that website that we opened, and refresh, which you can do by clicking this or by hitting Apple R or F5. then you'll see this is a little bit interesting. Even though we've got a new line here, so if hello world, then new line, and then on another line, I made a web page. If you take a look at this within the web browser, you'll see that it's all on one line. And that's how HTML works. HTML is the programming language that we're using here. So while this looks like just a normal Word document or something, this is actually a programming language. And in this programming language, all the white space, so things like space characters, new line characters, all of this gets collapsed down into a single space. But if the white space gets collapsed, like how would we make it look like this on the web page itself? Well, to do that, we use something called tags. This is where you can type, say, an angle bracket, this triangle bracket thing, and then BR, and another triangle bracket. So these brackets are the ones you get by hitting or holding Shift down and then pressing the comma or the dot keys. So if you put in this BR thing and then take a look in Safari again and refresh, you'll see that we get a new line. And if you put another BR in and save it, and then look in Safari and refresh again, you'll get another new line. So yeah, this is a tag. This is something which is, well, it's not directly displayed on the web page. So the text gets displayed here, but the tag means something else. And actually, there's a lot of tags. BR is not the only tag. BR for break. There's another one which is P for paragraph. And P for paragraph is a little bit different to BR, because instead of just putting a P by itself, you have an open tag and a close tag. And if I show you how that looks, you'll see it's kind of similar. But what we're doing here is, instead of saying, well, here's where we want the line break, we're saying, well, this is all the text inside of this open tag and close tag is a single paragraph. Sorry, I just got a question. How long are you going to be doing this? Well, I'm going to be doing this for 30 minutes today, and then I'm going to be doing it again tomorrow in about 12 hours time after I wake up. So I'm going to do this same one again in 12 hours-ish. I think that's what I'm going to do, but this should be recorded, so you should be able to watch it afterwards as well. Okay. So let's go back and have a look where we were. So hello world, I made a web page, both of these are paragraphs. What other kind of tags have we got? So far you've seen line breaks, which we can put inside a paragraph, by the way. So I could put a line break between hello and world and then refresh the page after saving, and you'll see this works. There's lots of different tags though. So I could make a list, an unordered list. That's what UL means. I could replace the P with an unordered list, and then this is a list item. So I can say hello world, save, refresh, and now we've got a list. So this is a very simple programming language, what you see here. This is HTML. That's why the file is called index.html. And, well, so far we can see we can make a lot of different types of things. We can make lists, we can make new lines, we can bold things using the strong tag. But there's only so much you can do with these kind of tags. To really make an interesting looking web page, you're going to need one other type of thing, which is called another language, which is called CSS. And to use CSS, what you do is you add this style tag. So I'm going to show you what CSS is without trying to explain it first. So let's start by, within this style tag, saying body, and then we'll set the background color to red, actually. Then I'll refresh the page, and you'll see that, well, the background color is now red. It's a little bit ugly, so let's not do that. Let's keep the background color white like it was, and set the color to gray. And you'll see now that the text color changes to gray. And so what this text inside the style tag does is it lets you set the style of the web page. But okay, so what does this body mean though? I mean, background color is reasonably obvious, color is reasonably obvious, but body is a little bit odd. So let me change this actually to something else. Let me change body to P for paragraph, and save it and refresh, and you'll see, okay, well, the text inside the P tag now has a color of gray, but the text inside the unordered list is still the default black color. So what's happening here is you can say, okay, for P tags, I want to set the styles to this, or for unordered list tags, I want to set the style to something else. Like I want to set the style so that it's a red color. And actually, there's a lot of different types of things you can set with the style. So you can say font style italic. Another one is a little bit more of a complicated one, is we can say transform, rotate 90 degrees. So we'll transform this unordered list. It disappeared because of how I did that. Here we go. Now it's down here. This is a little bit harder to use, obviously. So there's a lot of different things you can do. And this is, I guess, the point where I should stop and say, so, but how do you know what you can do? Because I've told you that there's a P for paragraph, there's UL for unordered list, there's LI for list item, there's a body, which is like well, this is actually a tag which is kind of automatically wrapped around everything. So this is the reason I could set the background color, is because there was a body tag added automatically. So let's set this again to like light gray. But how do you know what these what tags you can use, and how do you know which style properties and attributes you can use? So I think the easiest way to do that is to go to a website called MDN. So for example, if I was to search for MDN UL tag, what's going to happen is you'll get some details on the HTML UL element. So it'll show you an example of how you can use this. It'll give you an example of some of the stuff that you can do to style it. So let's actually give this a shot. Let's style all of the list items with, so we'll set it so that the style type for these dots here is actually a square. So let's give that a shot. Li list style type square. Okay, so I've got a question I just noticed. So does the CSS go at the top of the file or into a new file? That's a good question. You can actually do both. So you can put it at the top of the file in a style tag. You can put it at the bottom of the file in a style tag. Let me change this to not red so you can see. Or you can also use something called a link tag. And you can do rel equals, this is a little bit complicated, this is something called an attribute, and href equals styles.css or something like this. And instead of putting it, I don't know if this is even going to work, but generally you do something like this, and then you can get rid of the style tag and you still get the styles. Yeah. So you can put it in a separate file, or you can put it in a style tag at the top or the bottom or anywhere. I'm just putting it in a style tag so it's easier to see what's going on. But in an actual website, usually they would be in a separate file, like Darren mentioned. So that's a good question. Okay, so let's go back and see some of the other tags that are possible to use. We've seen UL, we've seen P for paragraph, we've seen body. But if we go back to this MDN website, you'll see there's a whole list of different types of tags, or elements as they're sometimes called. So we've got UL, but I think maybe if we have a look here, you'll see that there's also OL, which is for ordered list. So if we change UL to an OL after we saw OL on MDN, then you'll see that actually I have to remove the styles. And now instead of bullet points, we got 1, 2. And there's a whole lot of different tags. Again, if you have a look on MDN, you can see like a list of them, and you can play around with them and see what they do. So for example, if I was to pull out input, if I was to take a look at input, and if I see input and I'm like, what does input do? I can just type in input and see what it does. And then refresh this, and we got this input where we can type stuff in, which is really good if you say you want to make a contact form or some sort of form. But let's remove the input for now. And actually, I'm going to try and make it so this is on this side and this is on this side, so you can see both at the same time. That's going to be easier to work with, isn't it? Okay. So I think let's take a look at the div tag. This is probably the most commonly used tag when you're creating a website. And why is it common? Like, if you see, I just added this div tag. I've wrapped it around the ordered list and the paragraph, and nothing's happened. I've saved it. I've refreshed this. What's the point of having a tag which doesn't do anything? Well, the point of having a tag which doesn't do anything is you can use it to add styles. So for example, if I was to add a background color just to the div and save it, you'll see that only this part goes red as opposed to the whole body. And there's lots of different styles that you can apply to a div, just like everything else. Like for example, I could set the border radius to like 50 px, which means 50 pixels. And now the div is going to be rounded. Or I can set something called padding to 50 pixels as well. And now so we've got this big round, well, you can see what's happened is we've added some padding. So let's set that to like 20 pixels instead. And then we could add like another div. We could add one inside the paragraph or around the paragraph, or even within like a single. Let's add one inside the paragraph to see that we can do that. Okay, but one problem. So I've added a div inside the paragraph, but actually, let's put it around the paragraph. But what if we don't want all divs to be red? What if we want this div to have like a different background color to this div? So to do that, we can use something called an attribute. So instead of just having a tag by itself with an angle bracket here and an angle bracket here, we can add an attribute, for example, class. So let's make this one called wrapper, and let's make this one called, I don't know, description or something. And adding the attributes, the class attributes by themselves doesn't do anything. But what we can then do is we can use this dot wrapper, which is saying we want to apply these styles to every element with a class of wrapper, and then we can have another one. We can have dot description, which is saying we want to apply these styles to every element with the class description. We've only got one element of the class description at the moment, but I'll just copy and paste these styles and change the background color to green so you can see what's going on. And there we go. So by using classes and divs, you can apply styles to your elements, basically. And by combining these elements and classes and styles, you can create a web page. One more thing I want to point out though is that divs are not the only element which don't do anything, and they actually kind of do something. So let me show you what I mean here. So let's change this OL back to a div. Now let's remove the li, the list item. So let's just make this back into hello world, and remember, new lines get turned into just normal spaces. So this is going to say hello world. What happens if I wrap hello and world with divs? See if you can have a think about that. If I wrap hello in a div and I wrap world in a div, what do you think is going to happen? And just to make it a little bit more interesting, let's add a class to both of these as well. So this class is going to be, I don't know, hello or welcome. We'll make it a welcome class for this and a welcome class for this as well. And we'll make both of these have a font size, a font size of 30 pixels. So we'll try to make this text really big. What happens? If I refresh, Okay, so the text became really big like you'd expect it to. But for whatever reason, the text is now spread over 2 different lines. And the reason is that div is something called a block element. Every div is by default on a separate line, and it takes up the full width of the page, which is why you can see this has been applied to all of this. But there's another type of element which you can use to apply styles, which is called span. And if we change these divs to a spans, what will happen is hello world will now be over a single line because spans don't create new lines. And just to show you this in more detail, let's add a background color to the span by setting it on this welcome class. And I'm going to make this background color blue. And you'll see that this is only applied to the text itself. It's not applied to the full width. Okay, so now that you know the basics, you know about tags, you know about classes and attributes, and you know about styles, let's actually make something useful. So I'm just going to go through and use attributes and styles without telling you what they are. You know now that you can search for them in MDN. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a title screen for this video. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to use a tag called H1, which stands for heading 1. It's like usually used for the heading of a page. And learn something about programming in 30 minutes. I'm going to remove all this, refresh the page. And so, how do we want this page to look? Let's make the body background black. Then let's change the color of the H1. So I'm going to use a color, and colors are like a hash followed by 3 numbers or letters, or 6 numbers or letters. So if you make all the numbers the same, it becomes gray. Just play with this until I get a gray I like. The largest number you can use is F. So then I can use font family to change the font. Let's see. What font do I want to use? Let's use something like this, which is kind of ugly, but that's really ugly, but never mind. We can change that later if I have time. Set the size. Now, one thing you might notice is the size of this H1 is large by default because H1s are headings, and headings are usually large. But I can make that even bigger. I can make that like 70 pixels or something. And what else are we gonna do? I think that's a little bit too big. Okay, so we've got some text in an ugly font. That's too ugly for me. Sorry, I'm gonna change this to later. Didn't work. Well, actually, let me show you one more thing then. So, if you want to use fonts, then the thing is that not everyone has all the same fonts as you. So how do you solve that? Well, you use something called Google Web Fonts. I don't know if that's what it's still called. It's called Google Fonts now. So you come here and you browse through the fonts. You can set categories to just display because we want to use this for display, and you can type something like learn programming, and you can see what this looks like. I don't know what font I'm going to use. I'm just going to use this one because I don't have time to pick. And what you do is you grab this link tag, you copy it into the top of your web page, copy and paste, and now we can use this font family. So you can copy and paste this into the CSS, and that will set the font. There we go. So learn something about programming in 30 minutes. So that's the start. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to add a clock. So to make a clock, well, it doesn't have any. Well, it does have text, but I'm not going to add the numbers. I'm just going to make the clock by itself. So let's start by adding a div. A div is basically a box which doesn't have any styles, but I can set the class to hand. Or I'm going to set it to circle, or just clock. I'm just going to call it clock. You don't need this unless, well, divs are funny. You usually have to add the closing tag. You might have noticed that not everything needs a closing tag. BR doesn't, but div usually does. So let's add a clock, and because it's got a class, we can say dot clock to add styles. But if I add like background color EE, which is a gray, you'll see that nothing happens because by default divs don't have any size. You have to actually put something inside of them, or you have to set the width and height. So let's set this to 10 pixels. I'll set the height to, actually let's make it 100 and 100. Let's set the border radius to 50 pixels, and then let's refresh. So we've got this circle. Maybe we don't want the whole thing to be filled in with this background color. So instead of using background color, I can use border. And I can say we want 2 pixels of width. We'll set the color to this, and we want that border to be solid. There we go. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so we've added the outside of the clock. Now let's add a hand. So add another div. We'll add this closing tag. And this hand will have, say, 3 pixels of width. That'll have half the height of this, and we'll use the same color, but we'll use that background color instead of the border. And okay, so you can see this has appeared at the top left. We want to put it somewhere else. So what you can use is you can use this left attribute, which just moves it over to the it doesn't do it unless you actually add position absolute. So there's lots of these different properties you'll eventually learn if you play around with CSS enough. Okay, so far so good, but this doesn't really look like a clock unless it starts moving around, I think. Actually, let's make the height 90 pixels and top 10 pixels. Oh, one more thing I have to do, sorry, is I have to set position relative. These positions are one of the things that take a little bit to get used to. I'm not going to go into them too much in this video, but you can read up on them if you want, or I'll go into them in more details in another video. For now, all you need to know is that relative makes the top and left, absolute is needed if you want to set these top and left on a div usually, and you need to add position relative to whatever the div is, which is kind of wrapping that. So let's make one final adjustment. Let's make an animation. And to do that, this is a little bit tricky. You have to add this at keyframes thing, and I'm not going to explain this. You can look it up again on MDN if you want. I'll explain more in another video. I'm going to call the animation rotate, and I'm going to say rotate 0 degrees, and at 100%, we'll rotate 360 degrees, and then we set animation rotate linear and infinite. I don't know if this is going to work. Let's try it. It hasn't worked. Okay, but that's okay. Things don't usually work the first time when you're programming. If they do, that's really odd. So let me see if I can figure out where I've gone wrong. I'm going to start by putting in like 50% and like 180 degrees and seeing if that works. No. Okay, so this is where what I would usually do is I would Google for something. So let's do that. Let's Google for CSS keyframes, and we'll probably find an example of it on MDN. I usually, if I see that in one of the links, then I'll just use it because it's usually the best one. Okay. So this tells us about how to write keyframes. Probably what I want to use look for is actually details on animation. So what I have forgotten to say, set on the animation is the duration. I forgot to say how long that animation should take. So if I set that to 3 seconds and then refresh, There we go. So that's not quite right. I think the next thing I need to do is set the anchor point for that transform. And how do we do that? So we need to look at transform, rotate, CSS. Now I'd avoid w3schools.com. I would usually, I'm going to keep saying it, look at this at MDN. So the transform origin property, I think, is what we want. The fixed point that the element rotates around, mentioned above, is also known as the transform origin. This defaults to the center of the element, as you can see, but you can set your own custom transform origin using transform origin property. And just so you know, all of these things on the left-hand side in the CSS are properties, and these are values, I think we call them. So we can say transform origin bottom. Let's give this a shot. There we go. Now, of course, our clock doesn't take 3 seconds to go around, it takes 60 seconds. So let's do this. There we go. We've made a clock in CSS. And let's add some text to the top and the bottom just to finish it off. We'll add 0 and 6. So let's add another div, numbers, and inside the numbers, oh, we don't even need that. Let's just say number 0 and number 6, because there's a 6 at the bottom, number 30. Let's say 0, 30. And okay, so this numbers haven't showed up. That's interesting. Why might that be? Well, I think it's because they're actually showing up, but they're in black. So let's start by adding a color to number 0 and number 30. And what we can do is do just number 30, number 6. Did I say number 30 down here? I said that, okay. Number 0 and number 6. Let's add color white. Okay, that's what we expected. Now, you probably don't want to add the color to both of these. I mean, if you have 12 numbers, you don't want to have to write this out over and over again. So what you can do is you can say we want to set the color of white for number 0 and number 6. There we go. And in fact, we can go even better. I won't show you in this episode, but there's an even better way of doing this where you can apply the multiple classes. Specify multiple classes instead of specifying just one. But I'll do that in another video. So I've set this. I want to set the font family, so I'm just going to copy and paste. And there's also better ways to do this as well. Let's just do it the easy way now. I'll set the font size to 16 pixels, I'm guessing, thereabouts. Oh, maybe it's already at 16 pixels. 18 pixels? Yeah. Looks like 16 is the default. 24. Okay, and then I'm just going to have to position these. So I set position absolute, like we did for the hand. Left 100 pixels, top 5 pixels. Let's put this a little bit further left. I'm just going to eyeball it. And we'll do the same for number 6, but we'll put it at the bottom. And to do that, I could set it like a really high number for top, or I could say bottom 5 pixels. And we'll set the same value for left. So we can apply this to both of these. And, you know, let's make that hand a little bit smaller so it's not, just a little bit smaller. So change these numbers on the height and top. There we go. Okay, I think I'm getting somewhere. I don't think this is quite good enough to use for the video just yet, the video title just yet, but we can keep working on this in another lesson, because I'm going to try and do 2 of these a day. I think I might just do this one again, and I'll just keep working on this one tomorrow night or morning, wherever you are at the same time. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, I'm sorry, I've seen another question. Let me answer this. Will you save the written code at the end so that we can go through this? That's a very good question. Very good idea. Let me do that right now, and I'll just keep the stream on while I'm doing that. So I can just delete this styles.css because we don't need it at the moment. I'm going to copy and paste this into a gist. So gist.github.com index.html work in progress code for first lesson of learn something about programming in 30 minutes. And I'm going to tweet this out, and I'll add it to the comments or the description or both, one of them, of this YouTube video. Okay. So here is the full code for this. You can copy this into a file called index.html, and you can open that in Safari and it should work. You can start modifying stuff. There we go. I've just posted this. And yeah, thanks again for watching. And yeah, if you find anyone, if you know anyone who would find this useful, or who wants to learn about programming, or who just wants to do something other than look at bad news at the moment, then I'll be doing this again once or twice a day. I'm going to announce it on Twitter, and you should be able to find details if you subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.